I couldn't believe my eyes. 20 years. 20 years of letters, hidden away like some dark secret, lying there in a dusty box under Mom's bed, untouched, unseen, unread. My hands shook as I pulled them out one by one, the envelopes yellowed, the ink fading, each one addressed to me from my birth father, someone I had dreamed about but never met. And there she was, Mom, standing in the doorway, pretending she didn't know I had found them. My chest tightened, my throat burned, and I wanted to scream. Why? How could you do this to me? Rage, betrayal, and heartbreak collided inside me, and suddenly, the quiet life I thought I had was gone. Everything I believed about my family, about trust, had shattered in one horrifying moment. I knew then that my life would never be the same. What would you do if your own mother kept your father's letters hidden for 2 decades? Would you forgive her, confront her, or plan your own way to get justice? Comment below and tell me what you'd do. I grew up in a small suburban town, living what I thought was a normal life. My mom, Cynthia Harper, was always busy with her work as a real estate agent, juggling clients and family dinners. My dad, or the man I thought was my dad, had never been in the picture, and Cynthia never talked about him. I assumed it was just a part of my story, something that didn't need questioning. School was fine, friends are kind, and I had dreams of going to college in another state, far away from the quiet chaos of her house. I never suspected that my mom was hiding a secret so deep it could change everything. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when I decided to clean the guest room. That's when I found an old, battered cardboard box under the bed. Curiosity made my fingers tremble as I opened it. Inside were dozens of letters, each one addressed to me, all from David Langston, my birth father. I froze, heart pounding, as realization crashed over me. My mother had known about these letters for years. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. I turned around to confront Cynthia. She was standing there, calm, almost smug. I didn't think you'd ever find them, she said. But I had found them, and in that moment, everything I believed about my family felt like a lie. I couldn't stop thinking about those letters. Every night, I sat alone in my room, reading each one, tracing David Langston's words with trembling fingers. He wrote about wanting to meet me, about loving me from afar, about dreaming of the day he could be part of my life. And all the while, Cynthia Harper had kept it from me, deciding what I could or couldn't know, controlling my reality like she owned it. Anger bubbled inside me, thick and heavy. How could she decide my life without me? How could she hide someone who wanted to be my dad for decades? I tried confronting her multiple times, my voice cracking with emotion. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Why hide him from me? Cynthia would shrug or change the subject, brushing off my questions like they were inconvenient truths. Each time, my frustration grew, but along with anger, there was heartbreak. For years, I had imagined what it would be like to have a father's love, to hear his advice, to just exist in his world. That chance had been stolen, or at least delayed, by someone I had trusted the most. I felt humiliated, like my life had been manipulated, and I hated the helplessness that came with it. Yet, amid the despair, determination started to take root. The betrayal ignited something I hadn't felt before, a need for justice, for confrontation, for reclaiming control over my story. I began documenting everything, every hidden detail Cynthia tried to bury, and thinking about ways to confront her that wouldn't just be words but action. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was resolute. By the end of those long nights, I knew one thing. I couldn't let her lie define me. I wouldn't just be a victim of her secrecy. I would find a way to show her the consequences of keeping me from my own father, and I would do it on my own terms. I started paying closer attention to Cynthia Harper's routines. Every morning she left for work at the same time. Every night, she went straight to her study, locking the door behind her. I quietly documented her habits, noting the moments she seemed most confident, most untouchable. I wasn't planning anything reckless, yet. I was observing, learning, preparing. At first, it felt strange to think of revenge. I had always been the good daughter, the one who followed rules and avoided conflict. But now, That same sense of duty felt suffocating. How could I let someone dictate the story of my life for 20 years? I started leaving little notes of my own around the house, reminders of the truth, pieces of evidence Cynthia had overlooked, hints of what I knew. It was subtle, almost playful, but with every note, the tension in the house grew. I could see her noticing, questioning, but never fully understanding. And with every passing day, the plan in my mind became clearer. When the right moment came, Cynthia Harper would finally face the consequences of her secrecy, and I would reclaim my life and my story on my terms. I decided the moment would be public, not to humiliate for cruelty's sake, but to make the betrayal impossible to sweep under the rug. Cynthia Harper loved her volunteer work at the community center. She thrived on being the gracious, helpful neighbor with a perfect smile. So I organized a small celebration there, under the guise of honoring her for 20 years of service. I invited neighbors, a few of her top clients, and crucially, I invited David Langston. He didn't know the whole plan. He only knew I wanted him present. The room smelled like lemon polish and paper programs. Cynthia beamed as people stood to applaud her. I sat near the front, hands folded, feeling the weight of every unread year behind me. When she finished her speech, I asked to say a few words. Her smile stayed confident. That's when I reached into my bag and pulled out the first envelope. Before we give Cynthia her plaque, I said quietly, "There's something I want everyone here to hear." I read the first letter aloud, David's handwriting spilling across the room, full of longing and apologies and plans that Cynthia had intercepted and hidden. Faces shifted. Conversations died. I read two more, my voice steady although my heart thudded like a drum. At the back of the room, David stood up, tears in his eyes, and walked forward. Cynthia's expression changed from surprise to colorless panic. She opened her mouth, then closed it. When she tried to speak, her voice was small, brittle. People who had trusted her now looked at her like strangers. A client muttered, "Why would she hide this?" A volunteer whispered, "She lied to her own daughter?" David stepped to the podium and, with a quiet dignity, told the room who he was and how he had written for years, waiting for a chance Cynthia never gave him. The hush in the room pressed on me like a physical thing. I felt rage and grief lift together, traded for something clearer, vindication, yes, but also a fierce, cold peace. Cynthia's proud facade crumbled in front of everyone she'd ever performed for. She tried to explain, to blame fear or circumstance, but the letters were there, yellowed and undeniable. Watching her unravel, I finally let out the sob I'd been holding for months, and with that sound came relief. The secret was exposed, and justice, however quiet and human, had been served. After the celebration, the adrenaline faded, and I was left with silence. Sitting alone in my bedroom that night, I replayed everything. The discovery of the letters, the months of planning, the climax at the community center. At first, I expected to feel triumph alone, but what I actually felt was a complicated mix of closure and sorrow. Cynthia Harper had shaped my life in ways I would never forget, for better and for worse. Her deception was cruel, yes, but it also forced me to grow stronger, sharper, and more aware of the power I held over my own story. I realized that revenge isn't about breaking someone else. It's about reclaiming your sense of self and refusing to be a pawn in someone else's game. I also recognized the value of timing and patience. Months of observing, thinking, and gathering courage had allowed me to act deliberately rather than rashly. That discipline became part of my victory, giving the exposure meaning beyond just humiliation. And most importantly, I learned that honesty is non-negotiable in relationships, especially family. Secrets, even when wrapped in love or fear, have consequences that ripple across decades. I could have let anger consume me, or I could turn the betrayal into a lesson about integrity, empowerment, and courage. Choosing the latter gave me peace, and that feeling was more satisfying than any fleeting satisfaction revenge alone could offer. Sometimes the hardest battles are not physical or public. They are emotional, internal, fought against betrayal and doubt, and one when you refuse to let them define your future. Life after the confrontation felt surreal at first. The neighborhood whispered, and Cynthia Harper avoided eye contact wherever she went, but I didn't feel vindictive anymore. The letters had connected me to David Langston, my birth father, and that relationship was slowly growing into something meaningful. We spent weekends talking, sharing stories, and building a bond that had been denied for far too long. My own life shifted, too. I became more assertive at work, more confident in social situations, and more protective of my personal boundaries. I realized I had spent years letting someone else dictate my emotional landscape, and now I was reclaiming it. I even reached out to friends I had distanced myself from, rebuilding the connections I had allowed to fray during the turmoil. Cynthia remained in my life, but our relationship transformed into something measured and cautious. I didn't forgive blindly, but I acknowledged that holding on to constant hatred would only hurt me. Instead, I focused on creating a life defined by honesty, connection, and self-respect. The experience also taught me to trust my instincts. If something felt off, I learned to investigate, to question, and to advocate for myself. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival, growth, and reclaiming the narrative of my life. For the first time in decades, I felt fully in control of my story. The past remained a shadow, but it no longer dictated the present. I had transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into awareness, and secrecy into a lesson that I would carry forward, always stronger than before. Sometimes revenge isn't about hurting someone else. It's about finding yourself again, reclaiming the parts of your life that were stolen or hidden. I discovered that the truth, no matter how delayed, is always worth pursuing. Exposing this secret didn't just bring justice. It brought clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of purpose. Now, I invite you, the viewer, to reflect on your own life. Have you ever been held back by someone else's secrecy or lies? How did you respond? Or how would you respond if it happened today? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of truth, courage, and empowerment.